The sound of the slap echoed through the mall like glass breaking, leaving her frozen, her cheek blazing with humiliation as strangers stared and whispered. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and never rise again. But then a voice, rich, commanding, unshakable, cut through the silence. "Touch my wife again." In that breath, her shattered world began to shift. If this story resonated with you, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The luxury mall glimmered with glass and light, its polished marble floors reflecting chandeliers that seemed more suited to a palace than a shopping center. Designer storefronts gleamed with gowns that cost more than Tasha made in a year, and the air carried the faint notes of expensive perfume mixed with the rich scent of imported coffee. She hugged a modest bag of discounted books to her chest, the only thing she could afford in a place like this. She wasn't here for the designer bags or silk dresses. She came because the bookstore in the far wing had the largest clearance section in the city. And maybe because there was something comforting about being invisible among people who never looked twice at someone like her. At 27, invisibility was survival. Her stepmother, Margaret, had taught her that. Margaret's voice still echoed in her mind, sharp, cold, relentless. 65 now, her hair silver but her posture still commanding, Margaret was a woman who thrived on control. Tasha had spent her childhood under that control, her father too weak, or too gone, to intervene. When he died, the cruelty only worsened. Words that cut, hands that stung, a steady stream of shame that convinced Tasha she was worthless. But she had left. She had chosen a shabby apartment and long hours at a bookstore over gilded cages and cutting remarks. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. And most days that was enough. Still, as she walked across the glossy floors of the luxury mall, she felt like an imposter. She kept her head down, her sneakers squeaking faintly against the tile while women in heels clicked past, their diamonds catching the light. She didn't see the figure watching her from across the atrium. Margaret never blended in, not even here. Her pearl necklace gleamed against her blouse, her chin held high as though she owned the chandelier-lit air itself. Across the city, Oliver Queens closed the folder on another deal. His office was a tower of glass and steel, its view of the skyline breathtaking, but to him, it was nothing more than another cage. Billionaire, mogul, media darling, the titles stacked high, yet none of them silenced the echo of a boyhood mistake he'd never forgiven himself for. His mother's words haunted him still. "Don't let fear make your choices for you, Oliver." But fear had shaped him. Fear of losing people, fear of betrayal, fear that all his money and power couldn't change who he really was, someone who had failed once and might fail again. That evening, restless, he dismissed his driver. Instead of dining at one of his clubs or disappearing into a penthouse silence, he walked. His steps, almost aimless, carried him to the luxury mall. The place where old money and new money collided, where faces blurred together in a sea of wealth. Only he didn't feel like one of them. He never had. And so the stage was set. Tasha, clutching her discounted books in a palace of glass where she did not belong. Margaret, 65 and merciless, her eyes glinting with the satisfaction of a predator about to pounce. And Oliver Queens, billionaire outsider, unknowingly steps away from a collision that would alter not just their night, but the course of their lives. The luxury mall shimmered like a palace, but for Tasha, its marble floors suddenly felt like ice beneath her feet. She was standing at the checkout counter in the bookstore, her arms filled with paperbacks she had carefully chosen from the clearance rack. For a moment, she felt almost at peace, the quiet hum of the store, the smell of ink and coffee drifting in from the cafe outside. And then she heard it, that voice. Well, if it isn't little Tasha. Her entire body went rigid. Slowly, painfully, she turned. Margaret. Her stepmother stood just beyond the counter, her silver hair wound into its usual severe bun, pearls glinting against a high-neck blouse. Time had aged her face, but not her presence. Margaret never looked small, never looked fragile. At 65, she still carried herself with the imperious authority of someone who believed the world bent to her will. And she was smiling, that tight, satisfied smile that always came before the cruelty. Tasha's throat closed. She thought about turning away, about running, but her feet refused to move. Margaret's eyes swept over the stack of cheap novels. Still wasting money on nonsense, I see. Books won't put food on your table. You'd think by now you'd have learned to do something useful with yourself. Heat crept up Tasha's neck. People in the store turned their heads. She kept her eyes down, wishing the floor would swallow her. "Please, not here," she whispered, her voice shaking. But Margaret's smile sharpened. She stepped closer, her heels clicking on marble. "Why not here? Why not let everyone see what an ungrateful, pathetic little failure you've become? You'll always be the child I clothed, I fed, I kept out of the gutter. Without me, you'd be nothing." Tasha flinched. It was the same refrain Margaret had used for years, a mantra carved into her skin. She thought she had escaped it when she left, but now it spilled out again, loud enough for strangers to hear. "Stop," she whispered, clutching her books tighter. And then it happened. Margaret's hand swung sharply across her face. The crack of it echoed through the bookstore, louder than the rustle of pages, louder than the murmur of shoppers. Tasha staggered back, the books slipping from her arms, scattering across the marble like broken pieces. Her cheek burned, her breath came in gasps, her vision blurred with tears. The entire store froze. Shoppers turned. Phones lifted. Whispers spread like wildfire. The image was unmistakable, a young woman, slapped by her stepmother in the middle of a luxury mall. Margaret's voice rose, sharp and triumphant. "This is what happens when you forget your place." Tasha's knees threatened to give way. Her mind screamed at her to run, to vanish, but her body was locked in place. It was like being 12 again, cornered in that kitchen, powerless. Only this time, the humiliation was public, under the chandeliers and glittering storefronts. Her breath hitched. Her lips parted. But no sound came. And then, a new voice cut through the silence. "Touch my wife again." The words thundered across the space, deep, commanding, undeniable. Every head turned. From the crowd stepped Oliver Queens. He moved with a quiet, coiled authority, his dark suit immaculate, his presence magnetic. The whispers grew louder, people recognizing him, the billionaire whose face often graced magazine covers. But he ignored the crowd. His eyes were fixed only on Margaret, and his expression was carved from stone. He crossed the marble floor with deliberate steps, placing himself between Tasha and her stepmother. His hand brushed Tasha's arm, steadying her. His touch was firm but gentle, grounding her as her knees wavered. Margaret blinked, her smirk faltering. "Wife." Her laugh was brittle, laced with disdain. "Don't be ridiculous. She's no one. Nothing but a charity case." Oliver's voice dropped lower, sharper. "Enough." He stepped closer, towering over her, his presence a wall she couldn't push past. "If you ever lay a hand on her again, you'll answer to me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The man who commanded boardrooms, who built empires, now stood in a luxury mall declaring protection over a woman most of them had overlooked. Margaret's eyes flicked between him and Tasha, fury and disbelief mingling. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in years, she looked uncertain. With a sharp inhale, she clutched her handbag and turned on her heel. Her heels clacked furiously against the marble as she stormed away, swallowed by the glittering crowd. The silence she left behind was thick, humming with aftershocks. Oliver bent down, gathering the scattered books from the floor. His movements were calm, deliberate, as if to shield Tasha from the curious stares around them. He placed the novels back into her arms, his eyes meeting hers. There was no pity in his gaze, no judgment, only a steady, quiet strength that pierced through her trembling. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice softer now, stripped of its earlier steel. Her lips trembled. Not physically. His jaw tightened, a flicker of fire passing through his eyes. He straightened, his hand brushing her arm once more. "Then hear me clearly. She will never touch you again. Not while I'm here." The words landed heavy in her chest, like a lifeline thrown into a storm. She didn't understand why he had stepped in, why he had called her his wife of all things. But as her stepmother's shadow finally retreated into the crowd, and his presence loomed steady beside her, she felt something she hadn't in years. Safe. The marble floors still gleamed under the chandeliers, but for Tasha, the world felt fractured. The crowd had thinned, people dispersing after the spectacle, though whispers lingered like smoke. A young woman clutched her cheek. A billionaire had stepped in, and the image was burned into every pair of eyes that had witnessed it. Tasha stood frozen, books pressed tightly against her chest, her pulse still a drumbeat in her ears. Her cheek burned, not from pain anymore, but from the humiliation of dozens of strangers watching her crumble under Margaret's hand. Oliver was beside her, steady, silent, radiating an unshakable calm. He hadn't moved away since gathering her books, hadn't stepped out of that role he'd declared so boldly, "Touch my wife again." Wife. The word stuck in her throat like a stone. She turned toward him, her voice rough, frayed at the edges. "Why, oh, why would you say that?" Oliver's eyes met hers, clear and unwavering. "Because she needed to stop. And nothing stops a bully like truth spoken with power." Her chest tightened. "But it wasn't true. I'm not your wife. I'm not," she swallowed hard. "I'm not anyone." Oliver's jaw flexed. He looked down at her, his voice steady, but threaded with something deeper. "You're not no one. Don't ever let her tell you that again." Tasha shook her head, hugging her books tighter. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe anyone who said the words she had longed to hear for years. But the voice in her head, Margaret's voice, was louder. Pathetic. Worthless. "Nothing without me." Her throat burned. She glanced around, seeing the curious eyes still peeking from behind shelves and doorways. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into the cracks of the marble floor. "I need to go," she whispered, her voice breaking. Oliver took a half step closer, concern flickering across his face. "Tasha." She flinched back, shaking her head quickly. "No. Please. Don't follow me." Her sneakers squeaked against the polished floor as she turned and hurried toward the exit, her bag heavy against her shoulder, her heart heavier still. She didn't look back. Oliver stood in the hollow space she left behind. The silence closed in around him, broken only by the faint murmur of shoppers beyond the bookstore's threshold. Why had he said it? Why had he stepped in so fiercely, as if her pain was his to carry? He could still see her, the tremble in her hands, the way her eyes darted like a bird caught in a storm. Something inside him had moved before his mind caught up. His voice had thundered before reason could weigh the consequences. "Touch my wife again." The words echoed back at him. The press would devour it if it spread. Billionaire Oliver Queens, suddenly declaring a stranger as his wife in the middle of a luxury mall. It was reckless, uncharacteristic, dangerous. And yet he didn't regret it. Because in that moment, when Margaret's hand had cracked across Tasha's face, Oliver had seen something he knew too well. Fear. The kind that rooted deep, that didn't fade when the slap ended. The kind that clung long after the bruises disappeared. He had seen it once in another face, a face he hadn't been able to protect. And he had sworn, silently, that he would never stand by again. Now he found himself keeping that vow, even for a stranger. Tasha stumbled out of the bookstore into the grand atrium of the luxury mall. The chandeliers glittered above her, mocking her misery. She pressed a trembling hand to her cheek, as though she could wipe away both the sting and the shame. Her stepmother's words gnawed at her. "You're nothing without me." Why did it still hurt, after all these years? Why, even now, as a grown woman standing on her own 2 feet, did she still feel like the scared girl who never measured up? And what about him? Oliver Queens. She knew who he was. Everyone did. His face was on magazine covers, his name on skyscrapers. He belonged in this palace of marble and chandeliers. She didn't. And yet he had stepped in for her. But it didn't make sense. Rich men didn't protect women like her. They didn't call them wife in front of crowds. They didn't look at them the way he had looked at her, as if her trembling didn't repulse him but pulled him closer. Tasha stopped by the fountain in the center of the mall, water cascading in glittering arcs. She set her books down on the marble edge, burying her face in her hands. Safe. For a brief second, when Oliver had stood beside her, she had felt safe. But safety, she reminded herself bitterly, was always temporary. Margaret would be back. She always came back. Oliver left the bookstore, his stride purposeful but slower than usual. He spotted her by the fountain, shoulders hunched, books stacked neatly at her side. For a moment he hesitated. Something in him urged him forward, but another voice, the one that had kept him guarded all these years, warned him away. This wasn't his business. He had no right to get involved. And yet he couldn't turn back. He approached, his footsteps soft on the marble. "You dropped this." Tasha looked up to find him holding a small paperback, one that must have slipped from her bag. His hand extended toward her, steady, unyielding. She hesitated before reaching for it, her fingers brushing his. The brief contact sent a jolt through her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes darting away. Oliver studied her for a long moment, his voice low. "You don't have to go through this alone." Her throat tightened. "But I do. I always do." Their eyes met then, hers brimming with unshed tears, his filled with something fierce, something unspoken. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then Tasha gathered her books, hugged them tight, and walked quickly toward the exit, leaving Oliver by the fountain, his hand hanging empty at his side. Both of them walked away that night carrying the same weight, a connection forged in fire and a resistance born of fear. Neither was ready to admit it yet, but the collision was only beginning. The fountain's soft trickle followed Tasha as she walked toward the glass doors of the luxury mall, her books clutched tightly to her chest. She prayed that if she walked fast enough, if she kept her head down, she could vanish into the night before anyone else noticed her trembling. But the universe had other plans. "Miss, excuse me." The sharp voice came from her left. A uniformed mall security guard stepped into her path, clipboard in hand. "We need to take a statement about the altercation." Her blood froze. "A statement?" The guard nodded stiffly. "Yes, ma'am. Several witnesses reported seeing your relative strike you. Management takes these things seriously." Panic surged. A statement meant attention. Attention meant Margaret would know she had talked. And Margaret always found a way to make her pay. I don't," Tasha stammered, her grip tightening on her books. "I can't. Please, I just want to go home." The guard frowned, opening his mouth again, but another voice cut in, smooth yet commanding. "She won't be giving any statements tonight. I'll handle this matter personally. Oliver." He appeared at her side once more, his presence steady and unyielding. His gaze locked on the guard, cool and authoritative. "If the mall has concerns, have them directed to my office. Queens Holdings has a stake in this property. I'll see that it's resolved properly." The guard's eyes widened. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by deference. "Of course, Mr. Queens. I understand." He gave a short nod, then stepped back, muttering something about protocol before disappearing into the crowd. Tasha exhaled shakily, her knees threatening to give way. Why did you? Because you were about to run, Oliver interrupted softly, his eyes steady on hers. And running doesn't make the pain disappear. It only makes it follow you harder. Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't know what Margaret was capable of, but the word stuck. Instead, she muttered, "You don't understand." "Then explain it to me," he said quietly. They ended up at the cafe on the second floor, a quiet corner tucked away behind frosted glass walls. Oliver had insisted on buying her something warm. Just sit. I'll take care of it, and returned moments later with 2 mugs of chamomile tea. Tasha stared down at the steam rising from hers, refusing to meet his eyes. You didn't have to do this. I know. He stirred his tea with deliberate slowness. But I wanted to. Silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Outside the cafe, the mall hummed with luxury, the clinking of glasses at a champagne bar, the shuffle of designer bags, the faint echo of a pianist playing near the escalators. In their corner, the air felt almost too still. Finally, Tasha spoke. She's my stepmother. Oliver didn't flinch. I figured. She raised me after my father died. Her voice was flat, practiced. She had told the story before, always with the same numbness. But raising me didn't mean loving me. It meant controlling me, reminding me every day that I was a burden, that I should be grateful for scraps. Her eyes stung. She blinked hard, staring at the tea. And sometimes, when words weren't enough, Oliver's jaw tightened. He didn't press her to finish. He didn't need to. The silence spoke for her. Tasha drew in a shaky breath. I left 2 years ago. I thought I was free. But she always finds me. She shows up, calls, leaves letters. Like, she can't stand the idea of me living without her. For the first time, she looked up and found Oliver's gaze already on her. His eyes weren't pitying. They were fierce, protective. That ends now, he said firmly. Tasha shook her head. You don't know her. She doesn't stop. She'll find a way to twist this, to make me the villain. She always does. Oliver leaned forward slightly, his voice low. Tasha, she doesn't get to control the narrative anymore. Not here. Not while I'm around. Her chest tightened. The conviction in his tone felt dangerous, not because it scared her, but because she wanted to believe it, wanted to lean into it, to let it hold her steady. But belief was a risk, and Tasha had spent too many years paying the price for trust. She pushed her mug away, rising abruptly. I can't do this. Oliver stood as well. Do what? This. Her hands trembled as she gestured between them. You stepping in, acting like you care, acting like you can fix something that's been broken my whole life. You don't know me. You don't know her. Her voice cracked. You should have just stayed out of it. Oliver's expression softened, though his stance remained strong. Maybe, but I couldn't. The words hung there, charged with something neither of them was ready to name. Tasha's eyes burned. She grabbed her books, clutching them to her chest like armor. I need to go home. Then let me drive you, Oliver said. She blinked at him. No. That's too much. It's not. His tone was steady, final. After tonight, I'm not letting you walk out of here alone. For a moment, she wanted to argue, but something in his voice, an echo of the same authority that had silenced Margaret, made her pause. And though every wall in her screamed to resist, a small, exhausted part of her gave in. Fine, she whispered. Oliver nodded once. Good. Let's go. As they left the cafe together, the hum of the luxury mall swirled around them. Tasha's steps were hesitant, her books clutched tightly, but Oliver's presence beside her was a steady anchor. For the first time in years, Margaret hadn't won. And though Tasha fought to resist it, a fragile spark of hope flickered quietly in the hollow of her chest. If you were in Tasha's place, would you have accepted Oliver's help, or walked away to protect yourself? What would you do and why? The drive from the luxury mall was cloaked in silence, save for the low hum of Oliver's car engine. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, neon streaks flashing against the leather interior. Tasha sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her stack of books cradled against her lap like a shield. Oliver drove with one hand on the wheel, his gaze forward, his posture composed. Yet the air between them wasn't cold. It was taut, alive with unspoken words. Finally, he broke the silence. You don't owe me anything, Tasha. Not an explanation. Not gratitude. Nothing. Her grip tightened on the books. Then why do you keep helping me? His jaw shifted, the streetlights catching sharp angles of his face. Because I know what it feels like to be trapped by someone else's cruelty. To think you don't deserve better. And I can't stand by and watch it happen again. Again. The word landed heavy. She turned her head, studying his profile. What do you mean, again? For a moment he didn't answer. His knuckles whitened against the steering wheel. Then he exhaled slowly. When I was 14, he said, his voice low, almost reluctant, I watched someone I cared about get hurt. I was too scared to speak up, too scared to fight back. And I've lived with that silence ever since. Tasha's breath caught. He didn't look at her as he spoke, but his words carried the weight of years. Money doesn't erase it, Oliver continued. Success doesn't bury it. That moment shaped me more than anything else ever has. And when I saw her, your stepmother, strike you, his jaw clenched. It was like I was 14 again. But this time, I refused to stay silent. The car fell into silence once more, his confession settling heavy between them. Tasha swallowed hard. You were just a kid. You can't blame yourself for that. His lips pressed into a thin line. A kid can still know right from wrong. And silence is still silence. She looked down at her hands, fingers trembling around the edges of her books. His story shouldn't have comforted her, but it did. Because here was a man who seemed unshakable, a billionaire with the world at his feet, admitting that he too carried ghosts. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as broken for carrying hers. Oliver parked outside her apartment building, the car's headlights sweeping over the cracked pavement and peeling paint of the old complex. He turned off the engine, leaving them in the dim glow of a flickering street lamp. You live here? His tone wasn't judgmental, just quiet, weighted. Tasha nodded quickly, ashamed. It's what I can afford. He studied the building for a moment, then turned back to her. No one should have to settle for surviving. You deserve more than this. Her chest tightened. You sound like you know me, but you don't. You don't know what I've done to get even this far. He leaned back slightly, his expression steady. Then tell me. The words startled her. She had spent years hiding, burying, surviving in silence. But something about the way he said it, not as a demand, but as an invitation, unraveled her defenses. She lowered her gaze, speaking barely above a whisper. After my father died, Margaret made sure I knew I was unwanted. She dressed me in clothes that didn't fit, reminded me at every meal how much I cost her. And when I turned 16, she told me if I wanted anything extra, I'd have to earn it myself. Her throat tightened, the words burning as they left her. So I worked. I scrubbed floors at the school after hours, stocked shelves in corner stores, babysat for neighbors. And every paycheck, she'd take half. Said it was rent. Said it was the price for not being thrown out on the street. Oliver's eyes darkened, a storm gathering there. Tasha forced a bitter laugh. Funny thing is, when I finally left, I thought she'd be relieved. But she still follows me. Shows up where I am. Like, she can't stand the idea of me living without her. Silence hung heavy in the car. Tasha hugged her books tighter, ashamed of the rawness spilling from her. So you see, Oliver, there's nothing to fix. This is just my life. Broken pieces and all. For the first time, She looked at him directly, bracing for pity. But pity wasn't in his eyes. Instead, there was a quiet fire. "You're not broken," he said firmly. "She tried to break you, but you're still here. That's strength most people wouldn't survive." Her breath caught. The words lodged deep, reaching a place untouched for years. And for the first time since the slap in the mall, her tears fell, not from shame, but from the startling, fragile relief of being seen. Oliver reached into the glove box, pulling out a small card. He held it out to her. "This is my personal number. If she comes near you again, call me. No matter the time. I'll come." Tasha stared at the card, then at him. "Why?" His eyes didn't waver. "Because I refuse to stay silent. Not this time." Her hand shook as she took it. She pressed it against her books, clutching it like another lifeline. And though fear still whispered in her chest, another feeling crept in alongside it. A dangerous one. Hope. Tasha lingered in the passenger seat long after Oliver had turned off the engine. The dim glow of the street lamp flickered outside her apartment building, its cracked steps and peeling paint a stark contrast to the gleaming luxury mall they'd left behind. Her books rested against her lap, but her grip on them had loosened. She knew she should get out. Thank him. Leave. But her chest was heavy, her pulse quick, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't want the night to end. Oliver seemed to sense it. He didn't reach for the ignition or glance at his watch. He simply sat there, one arm resting on the steering wheel, his gaze steady but unpressing. Finally, she broke the silence. "I'm not used to people listening." His brow furrowed. "They should've. A long time ago." Tasha gave a hollow laugh. "Margaret always said my voice was useless. That nobody wanted to hear me ramble." Oliver's jaw tightened, but his tone stayed gentle. She was wrong. The firmness of his words caught her off guard. For a moment, her eyes stung, and she turned quickly to the window so he wouldn't see. "You know," Oliver said after a pause, "when I was your age, I hated silence. I filled it with noise, meetings, parties, anything to drown out my own thoughts. But now silence is the only place I can hear the truth." Tasha glanced back at him, surprised by the confession. What truth? That loneliness doesn't disappear just because the room is full. His eyes flickered toward her, steady, vulnerable. Sometimes it's worse. Her breath caught. She had never expected a billionaire, of all people, to understand loneliness. But in his eyes, she saw the same hollow ache that lived in hers. And then, unexpectedly, she laughed. It was small at first, but real. "You don't strike me as the type who drinks chamomile tea and talks about loneliness." Oliver arched a brow, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "And what type do I strike you as?" She tilted her head, studying him. The expensive Scotch, private jet, never lets his tie loosen type. He chuckled softly, the sound warm and disarming. "Maybe I was once. But lately I think I'd rather be the chamomile tea type." The corner of her lips curved upward despite herself. "I never thought I'd see a billionaire drinking tea in a mall cafe with someone like me." Oliver leaned back in his seat, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe that's because you don't see yourself clearly. Someone like you deserves to be seen everywhere, even in a place built for chandeliers and silk dresses." Her cheeks warmed. She turned her gaze back to her lap, fidgeting with the edge of a paperback. Compliments were foreign to her. Praise felt dangerous, like something Margaret would snatch away. But Oliver's words didn't feel like flattery. They felt steady, grounded, true. The conversation stretched, soft and meandering. She told him about her favorite authors, the comfort she found in secondhand books, the way stories gave her a world to belong to when she had none. Oliver listened intently, occasionally asking a quiet question. He confessed he hadn't read a novel in years, buried too deep in financial reports and contracts. But when she spoke about the way a sentence could stay with her for days, or how she'd reread her favorite passages until the pages fell apart. His gaze softened. I think I forgot books could do that, he admitted. Do what? She asked. Make you feel like you're not alone in your own head. Tasha's lips curved into a fragile smile. Then maybe you need to start reading again. Maybe I do, he said, his eyes lingering on her. The air between them shifted then, lighter, warmer. For the first time that night, Tasha's body eased back against the seat, her shoulders relaxing. She caught herself smiling more than once, a foreign but welcome sensation. And Oliver felt the strange comfort of seeing her smile. It wasn't just that she was beautiful when she did. It was that her smile felt like sunlight breaking through clouds he'd been under for far too long. Eventually, Tasha sighed, glancing toward her apartment. I should probably go in. It's late. Oliver nodded, though something flickered in his eyes, as if he wasn't quite ready to let her go. Still, he reached for her books, lifting them gently from her lap and placing them back into her arms. As she opened the door, he said quietly, Tasha. She paused, turning back. I meant what I said earlier. If she comes near you again, call me. No matter what time. Her throat tightened. She nodded, clutching the books closer. Thank you for tonight. For everything. Oliver's lips curved into the faintest smile. It's only the beginning. Tasha stepped out, her sneakers crunching against the gravel. But as she walked toward the worn steps of her apartment, she glanced back. Oliver was still there, sitting in the car, watching until she disappeared safely inside. And though she lay awake that night staring at the cracked ceiling for the first time in years, the loneliness didn't feel quite as heavy. The following evening, Tasha returned to the luxury mall, drawn by something she couldn't explain. Maybe it was the bookseller's promise of a new shipment. Maybe it was the faint hope of seeing Oliver again, though she'd never admit it aloud. She walked through the polished corridors, the glittering chandeliers above her casting fractured light across marble floors. Designer bags swayed in manicured hands around her, but she clutched only her canvas tote, filled with her own well-worn paperbacks. Her heart eased as she stepped into the quiet sanctuary of the bookstore. The smell of ink and paper grounded her. She had just reached for a novel when a familiar, icy voice sliced through the air. Well, isn't this convenient? Tasha froze. Margaret. Her stepmother stood near the entrance, dressed impeccably in a tailored coat, her silver hair pinned back, her cane tapping lightly against the polished tile. At 65, she still radiated control, her sharp eyes narrowing as they locked on Tasha. You've been busy, Margaret sneered, her voice carrying in the quiet shop. Parading yourself around here, clinging to men above your station. Do you think it'll last? Do you think he won't see what you really are? Heat rose to Tasha's face. Leave me alone. But Margaret only stepped closer, her cane tapping like a metronome of menace. I raised you. I know every lie you've told, every pathetic plea you made. Do you want me to show him? Her hand dipped into her handbag, and she pulled out a small envelope, worn at the edges. She shook it, her smile tight. Letters. The ones you sent me when you ran away the first time. Begging to come back. Begging me not to leave you in the dark. Do you think he'll still see you as strong when he knows the truth? That you always crawl back. Tasha's chest tightened, her pulse hammering. Those letters were from years ago. I was desperate. I had nothing. And nothing is what you still are. Margaret's eyes glittered. And now you're clinging to him like he's your salvation. He'll see it. He'll see you're nothing but a desperate, broken girl. A deep voice cut in. Enough. Tasha whipped around. Oliver stood behind her, his tall frame rigid, his expression unreadable. Margaret's smile only widened. Ah, the billionaire himself. Perfect timing. She extended the envelope toward him. Read for yourself. See the girl you're protecting. See the pathetic child who begged me for scraps. Do you really think she's changed? Or is she just using you the same way she tried to use me? The world slowed. Tasha's heart pounded, her throat closing as Oliver reached for the envelope. Don't, she whispered. But he had already taken it. He slid the letters out, the old paper crinkling as he unfolded one. Tasha's words stared back at him, written in a younger, desperate hand. Please don't shut me out. I'll do anything. I can't survive without you. Shame washed over Tasha, hot and suffocating. I was a child, she choked out. She made me believe I couldn't live without her. That doesn't mean. Oliver's eyes flicked up, conflict flashing across his face. For a moment, doubt shadowed his expression. Margaret seized it. You see?
She's always been weak.
Always begging, always clinging. You think you're her savior?
No.
You're just her next crutch. Stop it. Tasha's voice cracked, raw and desperate. That's not who I am anymore. But Oliver's silence cut deeper than Margaret's venom. Her chest heaved. You don't believe me. I want to, he said, his voice low, strained. But seeing these, he broke off, gripping the letter tighter. It makes me wonder if you're still chained to her, if part of you still needs her. The words sliced through her like glass. Tears stung her eyes, her body trembling. After everything I told you, after everything you saw, you still think I'd choose her? Oliver's jaw worked, but he didn't answer. And in his silence, Tasha shattered. You know what? She whispered, her voice hoarse. Maybe Margaret's right. Maybe I am pathetic. For thinking anyone, especially you, could ever see me as more than what she made me. She grabbed the letters from his hand, crumpling them against her chest. Then she pushed past both of them, her footsteps echoing as she fled the store, the mall's glittering light blurring through her tears. Oliver didn't move. He stood frozen, the sound of her departure cutting through him like a wound reopening. Margaret's smile lingered as she leaned on her cane. You see, Mr. Queens? I always win. But Oliver barely heard her. He was too busy replaying the look in Tasha's eyes, the raw hurt, the betrayal, the breaking. And for the first time in years, he wondered if he had just destroyed something that could never be mended. Do you think Oliver should have trusted Tasha instantly, or was his hesitation understandable given the letters? What would you have done in his place? Tasha's apartment had never felt so suffocating. The cracked ceiling loomed overhead as she lay curled on her narrow bed, Margaret's letters crumpled beside her like venomous reminders. Her chest ached from crying, but the tears wouldn't stop. She kept hearing Oliver's voice, strained, uncertain. It makes me wonder if you're still chained to her. The words burrowed deep, gnawing at the small, fragile hope she had let herself believe. She had wanted to trust him, needed to trust him, but in the moment that mattered, he had hesitated. And hesitation, she had learned, was just another form of abandonment. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She ignored it. Then it buzzed again, vibrating against the chipped wood. With a shaky hand, she reached for it. A message. From Oliver. Tasha.
I'm sorry.
Please let me explain. Her breath hitched. She stared at the screen until the words blurred. Part of her longed to answer, to let him come and undo the hurt. But another part, the part that had lived under Margaret's cruelty for years, warned her. Don't you dare open that door. Don't you dare let him see you break again. She dropped the phone, pulling the thin blanket tighter around herself. For hours, she lay in silence, torn between longing and self-preservation. Across town, Oliver sat in his penthouse, the city skyline glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. But the view brought no comfort. His desk was littered with contracts and reports, yet his eyes stayed fixed on the crumpled copy of one of Margaret's letters, lying abandoned beside a half-finished glass of scotch. He had read it 10 times. The words no longer mattered. What haunted him was the look on Tasha's face when he hesitated, the flash of betrayal, the wound reopening. He pressed a hand to his forehead, his chest heavy. You're a coward, he muttered to himself. He had told her he refused to stay silent. He had promised he would stand by her. And yet, when Margaret shoved those letters into his hands, he had faltered. Not because he didn't believe Tasha, but because the ghosts of his past whispered, "What if you're wrong again? What if you failed to protect her the way you failed before?" He poured another drink, but it did nothing to dull the ache. He wanted to call her again, to drive to her apartment, to beg her to see that his hesitation was fear, not doubt in her. But pride chained him. What if she refused? What if she slammed the door in his face? He could command boardrooms, negotiate billion-dollar deals, silence a room with a single word. But with Tasha, he was terrified. Because this wasn't business. This was his heart. The night stretched long for them both. Tasha sat by the window, watching the city lights blink like distant stars. She thought of the chamomile tea, of Oliver listening as she spoke about books, of his quiet promise, "You're not broken." She wanted to believe those words, but belief required trust. And trust for her had always been dangerous. Oliver, meanwhile, paced his penthouse, Margaret's venom still echoing in his mind. She'll always crawl back. He clenched his fists, hating that he had let those words poison him, even for a moment. Hating that Tasha had paid the price for his hesitation. By dawn, both were exhausted, hollow, yet restless. It was noon when Oliver finally made his choice. He stood in front of the elevator to his private garage, his jaw set. Pride whispered that he should stay away, give her space, let the wound scab over. But pride had already cost him too much. He hit the button, determination burning through the fatigue. This ends now. Meanwhile, Tasha sat at her small kitchen table, the untouched letters spread before her. She traced her younger handwriting with trembling fingers. She could almost hear Margaret's voice, dripping with mockery. "You'll always crawl back." Her eyes burned. "No," she whispered. She grabbed the letters, shoved them into the trash, and pressed down hard, as if burying Margaret's voice beneath the weight of her own will. Her chest heaved, but a strange relief followed. For the first time, she realized she didn't need Margaret's approval. She didn't even need Margaret's memory. But what about Oliver? Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Shorter this time. "Please, let me see you." Her pulse quickened. She stared at the words, torn. If she opened the door to him, she risked everything. Her heart, her fragile progress, her belief that she could survive without being abandoned again. But if she didn't, she risked losing the one person who had made her feel seen, even if only for a moment. By the time the knock came at her door that evening, Tasha already knew her choice. Her hand hovered over the doorknob, her heart hammering. Pride screamed to stay silent. Vulnerability whispered to open it. She closed her eyes, drew in a deep breath, and turned the knob. And when the door swung open, Oliver Queen stood there, tired, raw, but with eyes that carried only one truth. He wasn't leaving without her. Tasha's breath hitched as she opened the door. Oliver stood there in the dim hallway, not dressed in the perfect armor of a billionaire this time, but in a simple shirt and jacket, his hair mussed, exhaustion shadowing his eyes. Yet what struck her most wasn't how he looked. It was the way he held himself, not with the polished confidence of the man who had silenced Margaret in the mall, but with the rawness of someone who had come to lay himself bare. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, thick with all the words unsaid. Then Oliver's voice, rough with fatigue, broke it. "I was wrong." Tasha gripped the edge of the door frame, her chest tight. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." He stepped closer, his voice firm but trembling at the edges. "I should have trusted you. I should have thrown those letters back in her face instead of letting them shake me. But I didn't. And I hurt you." Her eyes stung. She wanted to look away, but his gaze pinned her, steady, unflinching. "I don't care what those letters said," he continued, his voice thick with conviction. "You were a child. trapped under her thumb. What matters is who you are now. And what I see, what I can't ignore, is strength. Resilience. A woman who survived hell and still dares to dream. Her throat closed, a sob rising before she could stop it. Oliver's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists as if steadying himself. I'm not asking you to forgive me right now. I'm asking you to let me prove that I'll never doubt you again. That I'll stand with you, against her, against anyone. Tasha's breath shook. And if you can't, his eyes softened, the rawest honesty shining through. Then I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it. Silence fell. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. For so long, she had been conditioned to expect abandonment, to brace for betrayal. But here was Oliver Queens, the billionaire who could have walked away, who could have hidden behind power and distance, standing in her worn-down hallway, choosing vulnerability instead. And in that moment, Tasha realized she had a choice too. Pride could keep her safe, but it would also keep her alone. Slowly, she stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in," she whispered. The apartment was dim, the single lamp casting soft light across peeling paint and worn furniture. Oliver glanced around, but there was no judgment in his eyes, only quiet sorrow at the life she had endured. They sat at the small kitchen table, the same spot where Tasha had crumpled Margaret's letters hours before. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Tasha, her voice fragile but steady, said, "I was terrified you'd believe her. That you'd look at me and only see the weak, desperate girl she made me into." Oliver leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "I don't. I see the woman who defied her, who built a life, however hard, with her own two hands. That's who you are." Her lips trembled. "And what if I still feel like that girl sometimes?" He reached across the table, his hand hovering until she gave the smallest nod. Then his fingers closed gently over hers, warm and grounding. "Then let me remind you of who you are when you forget," he said softly. Tasha's tears slipped free, but this time, she didn't hide them. Days later, the confrontation came. Margaret appeared at the luxury mall again, as if drawn to the place of her greatest humiliation. She stood near the fountain, her cane clicking against the marble. When she spotted Tasha and Oliver approaching together, her lips curled. "Well," Margaret drawled, "I see the performance continues. Has he read all your letters yet? Or are you saving some for later?" Her words dripped with venom, but Tasha didn't shrink this time. She stood tall, Oliver steady at her side. "You don't get to control me anymore," Tasha said, her voice clear, echoing through the marble hall. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You'll always crawl back. You always have." "No," Tasha's voice didn't waver. "I don't crawl anymore. Not to you. Not ever again." Oliver stepped forward, his presence towering, his voice low and firm. "Touch her, speak to her, try to humiliate her again, and you'll answer to me. And I promise you, Margaret, I don't lose." The older woman's smile faltered. For once, her cane trembled slightly against the floor. She looked between them, her eyes narrowing with fury, before turning sharply and walking away, her heels clicking against the marble. Tasha exhaled shakily, her body trembling. Oliver's arm slipped around her shoulders, pulling her close. "She's lost her power, Tasha. She only had it as long as you believed her lies. But you've taken that back." Her chest swelled, a weight she had carried for years finally lifting. For the first time, she felt truly free. Weeks later, the bookstore became their sanctuary. Oliver kept his promise. He started reading again. The first book she recommended sat open in his hands as they shared a quiet corner together, the world outside melting away. Tasha leaned into his shoulder, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "You know," she murmured, "I used to think love was only for other people. People who weren't broken." Oliver closed the book, turning to her. "You were never broken, Tasha. And love isn't for perfect people. It's for people brave enough to choose it. Her lips curved into a smile, soft and genuine. Then I guess we're both brave. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his eyes steady. Braver than we ever knew. And as their hands intertwined, Tasha knew this wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of something she had never thought possible, a life not built on survival, but on love. Do you believe people can truly break free from the grip of their past and build a new future? Or do the scars always remain part of the story? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So, do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.